Last time on the WizardCast.
We have a dashboard Lightning component now. You can actually embed a dashboard inside
everywhere.
Lightning page.
Dashboards everywhere.
Dashboards everywhere. Wait, that didn't happen on the last WizardCast. That's from our Spring 18 overview.
Right, and we need to post a retraction. We were wrong.
Someone by the name of Niels reached out to us over at thewizardnews.com and told us that it's only for analytics, aka wave dashboards.
Not regular dashboards.
So, we were wrong. Brian, hang on. The last line of WizardCast segments, don't they typically have like made up plot points? This isn't a plot point made up. This is just like an actual, like something that happened.
Yeah, but I figured we actually use it for something that was last on WizardCast.
But it wasn't last on WizardCast. I mean, the last one would be playing audio from, Jessica Murphy interview, our last episode we just finished.
Oh, good point. Roll clip.
No, I'm not going to do that because we just did this. We had to do the retraction. It doesn't make sense.
Curse you, Mark. Now no one will take our last time on WizardCast segment seriously ever again.
I don't think anybody took it seriously to begin with.
And now the conclusion of the WizardCast.
I'm Brian Kwong.
And I'm Mark Ross.
We're Salesforce experts that love talking about technology and Salesforce.
We also love humor. Doesn't mean we're actually good at it.
In the Salesforce community, I'm known as the Salesforce Wizard, likely due to me wearing a wizard hat at Salesforce events.
And I'm known as Salesforce Yoda for pretty much the same reason.
You should see the ears.
We have a passion to help educate and entertain people.
So we've joined forces to create WizardCast.
We've got tips and best practices.
We talk with interesting people.
All mixed with quote-unquote jokes and humor.
Welcome
to the
WizardCast. What do you call it when Batman skips church?
What?
Christian Bale.
That's actually kind of funny.
Is it? 'Cause I don't get it. Amy Appelinger submitted that to us. You might remember from our Imposters Everywhere episode.
Yeah, I know. No,
Yeah.
that's actually kind of witty and clever, and I think it's funny personally. I'm proud of that one.
Why? I don't get it.
Maybe that's why I'm proud of it.
Before we start, I need to give a public service announcement.
Aren't public service announcements supposed to be like urgent? Like we need to tell you something right now. This is a podcast. We don't have any control over when people are going to listen to this.
True, but tough luck. Due to budget constraints, the WizardCast will not be available on February 30th and 31st.
Wait, what do you mean not available? You mean
as in
if you go to your podcast app, it will not be there?
It'll be gone. The WizardCast will be completely offline. You won't be able to get the audio at all.
What?
It's just simply not going to be available for anyone on the 30th and 31st of February.
So if you see us gone, vanished into the ether, some reason it's not there, you can't get your WizardCast fix, fear not, fair mortals, for our presence shall again be upon you.
On March 1st.
Yes. Wait. I get it.
What?
Took me a second. I get it.
Get what? WizardCast is sponsored by Podcasters Anonymous, the group responsible for rehabilitating podcast addicts everywhere.
Hang on. No. No, we're not. I thought we weren't doing fake sponsors. That's clearly not a real group. We're not doing it because we have the Libsyn affiliate people getting credit for using the promo code PodMagic. Oh my God, you got me to say that without even thinking about it. I hate you.
And I bet if Podcasters Anonymous started a podcast or wanted to move to a great flexible host, they would sign up for Libsyn and get a free month of service for free when using promo code PodMagic.
See, now you're just enabling them, Brian. They have a problem, and you're just feeding their addiction. You're a terrible person. I don't know why I associate with you, curse you, and your cunning and horrible ways, desperate attempts to recoup money.
Man, this has been a long podcast.
Yeah, you look a bit tired. You got some kind of bags under your eyes there?
Yeah. I think it's time for a coffee break. Coffee break is where we take something shared by Peter Coffee and talk about it.
Because Peter Coffee is awesome. Yeah. Peter recently tweeted, and I quote, adding AI to an enterprise tool that has poor adoption and therefore no source of data to feed the beast is like putting an automatic transmission into a car with an empty gas tank that's locked in a garage. Bright, shiny objects consume scarce attention, yield negative ROI.
That was the worst Peter Coffee impersonation I've ever heard.
I'm not going to try and impersonate Peter Coffee.
We're going to put the tweet link in the show notes.
Nobody can impersonate Peter Coffee.
We'll put the tweet link in the show notes. I think this is actually a really great point to make, especially since Salesforce has been selling the Einstein AI system. I hear a lot of people who are going, oh, AI this, AI that don't realize that machine learning only works if you have the right data to feed it.
Well, it's an interesting thing for Peter to tweet, because he's actually basically saying that companies who try to sell a flashy product that doesn't necessarily work for every company that they're marketing to is not a good thing. Now, I think that, the AI is definitely growing. I think that there's a certain amount of future inevitability in terms of how the AI is going to work. It's not going to need as much data, but right now,
well, let's key
you have to
on
have
this.
data. You cannot build bricks without clay.
Yeah, I mean, and let's key in on this, because it says an enterprise tool with poor adoption. So, like, if you have 200 salespeople and they're not consistent in putting their opportunity information in place, they're not consistently updating it, they're not moving the stages along, they're not marking the fields they need to mark, it doesn't matter if you have the most brilliant artificial intelligence out there with machine learning. Your data is poor, therefore the results you get out of that tool will be poor, and you just, basically bought a Ferrari with no gas and it's permanently locked in a garage.
Yeah. AI is pretty cool what it can do these days, but it is not it is not a salesperson. It cannot do their job for them. They do need to be making sure they're entering that data. And as Salesforce admins, we need to be making sure that we're actually setting up user interfaces that salespeople can use, and not only can, but will use. It's not a matter of, yes, this is perfectly usable. I don't know why you don't enjoy scrolling horizontally and clicking 20 times. That's not good. No, just because something works doesn't mean it's the right solution. It needs to be something that they borderline enjoy using if you really want people to be able to do that. And yeah, that's a challenge, but when you pull that off, your salespeople will let you know. They'll be appreciative. Be sure you do what you can to get that data entry adoption up. Almost any cost is worth it.
Thanks, Peter.
You enjoying that coffee?
Coffee break was exactly what I needed. Do you use Salesforce on a mobile device? Have you ever submitted support cases to Salesforce? How about working with Salesforce Product Managers? Then you'll want to stay and listen to our guest. She's an MVP and leads the New York City user group. She's a major enterprise admin. She was featured by Salesforce as a trailblazer. You've likely seen her on the Salesforce login page sporting that fancy trailblazer hoodie. Welcome, Cheryl Feldman, to the WizardCast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I love, 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 love this podcast. So thank you for continuing to do it, because I laugh so hard, but I also learn a lot. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. That's an awfully high pedestal you've placed this on. We shall endeavor to grace its peak.
I'm not going to be able to take the pressure, Mark.
One thing, though, we do want to point out where Cheryl works is classified, but we can tell you that it's one of the happiest, shiniest places on earth and only has the best bosses. The best.
As a matter of fact, we're so close to having to make this completely incognito. I mean, if you're sitting here with Skype, you can't see Cheryl on the camera. She's kind of like in the dark, hidden. We would have masked her voice, but that would sound really weird as an audio feature for an interview.
Yeah. They would have had that kind of weird, echoey, gravelly sound to it. Would have been very strange.
Would sound horrible in your ear pods.
Mm. So we came and asked if you wanted to do the interview, and we were talking about things you possibly talk about. And one of the first things that came to my mind is all the escapades that you've been dealing with mobile, because you've had, I mean, it's been a journey, an adventure of epic proportions. So why don't we kind of regale our audience with that story of your grand quest?
Sure. So I work for a very large financial services company. If you want to figure out which one, it is on my LinkedIn. I just can't say it on social media type things.
Your posts are your own.
So you can go research me if you want to know where I work. But we are a large financial services firm, and our salespeople are very much on the road all the time. So they live and die on mobile devices, iPads and iPhones. And when we were doing my goals at the end of 2016, essentially one of my goals for 2017 was to fix Salesforce Mobile for our salespeople, whatever that means, right?
Whoa. What do you mean fix Salesforce Mobile? It's perfect out of the box. There's nothing wrong with that as a platform.
Well, I think it's good if you have a very basic Salesforce instance. We do not. We have a very complex data model within Salesforce, so we have, against our contacts and accounts, tons of objects that house really important data that's very important to our salespeople to make very quick decisions. If you've ever used Salesforce Mobile, when you're on like a contact or an account, there's a related tab, and you'll see just this massive list of objects, and it'll say record 3+, something 3+, something else 3+. It's not helpful. That is not helpful, at least to my salespeople. And that was essentially what I was told to fix. And so from taking the Lightning Now tour, a huge shout out to Michael Orr and his team over at Salesforce. They put on these great events called these Lightning Now tours that hits a bunch of cities. So back at the beginning of 2017, they came to New York, and I brought my developer. He's not my developer, he doesn't report to me, but we work together. And we went because we had this idea of potentially using Lightning components on mobile. And neither of us had done anything with Lightning components before. Neither of us had really done mobile development before. So we went to this session and we ran it by one of the product managers and one of the developer evangelists. And they said, yeah, this is the way you should go. So we came up with one prototype, which turned into building a whole mobile app with using Lightning components and Lightning pages that became really well received by our salespeople. They absolutely loved it. It really kind of turned adoption around for us, especially for our salespeople. They weren't calling in so much. They were really using the app. They were logging in a lot more. And it really made our investment in the platform really worth it.
So, Cheryl, I'm curious, are your salespeople predominantly mobile-only users of Salesforce?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes, so they are on the road constantly. So they do between 25 and 35 meetings a week each. So they're in and out. They're like meetings every day. And so when they're walking into different offices and meeting with different people that we work with, they need to be able to see some really key information to make decisions and to know information about who they might be meeting with, because they may say, oh, I'm going to meet with this person, and there may be other people in that office they need to meet with or they're introduced to, and we have key information about those people in our Salesforce instance, and they need to be able to pull that up quickly and make decisions based on that information very quickly. So, and
I find that interesting because in my world, from a small org, I would like to use Salesforce One, but I'm a predominantly desktop user.
Yep.
And so for those people who are not trying to do anything with the Salesforce mobile platform, you don't really get to have a mobile page and a desktop page. This is what the page is for the most part. So if I was your salesperson and for some reason, I don't know, I'm using this big clunky laptop for the day because I left my phone back at home, is the experience the same for me when I log into Salesforce through a desktop versus when I'm using it on the phone? Since you did all this building in Lightning components.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we actually are still on Classic right now on desktop. We opted not, at least right now, to expose these components through Lightning out because we have other things we're doing on desktop. We've built with some different UI and CSS features that are in Visualforce that have been there for a while. So we're using those on desktop. It was really the mobile experience we wanted to focus on. I think when we start to make the move to Lightning, and I think why Lightning has gotten some buzz at my company is because people have been able to see what we can do with Lightning components, and not only Lightning components, but Lightning data service, which has made our Lightning components render really quickly. And that's one of the advantages of components if you're thinking about doing mobile development, is that because you can make things render on the client side versus the server side, you can make things render really quickly and make things sortable also, instead of having to constantly call back to the server through Apex and say, I need to, reload this list, instead of sorting by last name, I want to sort by their city or something like that. You can, pull all the data and then sort on the client side, which makes things a lot faster. So you're not always calling back, especially when you're on a mobile device.
So basically just really quickly able to see different data in different ways.
Yes.
Filter it, sort it,
yes,
shake it, turn it all around, do the hokey pokey.
Yes.
Got it.
And it was definitely a learning experience at first with Lightning components, but I think once we got the hang of it, and once Lightning data service was really ready for the prime time, I think that really helped us a lot as well. And the product managers on the Lightning team were great, and they were really supportive and developer evangelists. As we were going through building all these different pages and apps, they were giving us feedback and ideas and things we might do better. So that was really helpful as well.
So can you share some of the Lightning components that you use specifically for mobile to enhance that experience?
Yes. So we have a Lightning page that renders I think it's called like the Lightning tab component, but essentially looks like a tabbed interface. If you've seen when you're on Lightning App Builder, you have like a collection of tabs you can bring over. It looks very much like that, where our users, we have that at the top of the mobile nav. So when they come right into Salesforce, into the mobile app, they see this app, which has a tabbed interface of all the things that they need to know about their business, essentially. And then they can sort through it, looking at things in different ways. And so we've used the tab component. We also have a component that was a custom component that we built that rolls up a lot of different data. And the way we built the component, because we're using Lightning Data Service, we can actually expose different groups of data through it. So we're able to reuse that component on like multiple pages.
Ooh, that is very nice. Okay.
Yes.
So I'm going to ask you something, mainly because it's in your notes that you graciously sent to us as probably the most organized guest we've ever had. Especially considering we asked you to do the show yesterday. And I have to ask you because it is one of my favorite features now in Lightning. But flows. You're using flows in mobile. How are you using flows in mobile?
So this is actually pretty new. I think it just came out in this past release. So we actually just started testing it about a week ago. We're all testing it in a sandbox. So one of the features that came out in the spring release is the ability to launch a flow from an action. So if you think about it, previously when you had, so if you think about publisher actions when they were first released, originally they were tied to Chatter. And then, and it was, you could insert a record, and this was before Process Builder. And this was huge for admins. I remember seeing the potential right away. And then they just split the actions, and then you were able to do more things with mobile. And then you were able to trigger some other things and some other things. And now you're able to launch a flow, which means if you wanted to create an action with like a custom page and render different things based on what a user selects, you can do that using your flow and the flow designer. But you don't have to necessarily code and use Lightning components. However, I believe I think it was either the winter release or the spring release, I don't remember, but in one of the recent releases, you're able to add components to Flow as well. So if you have components that you want to use, you can add them within your Flow, which really makes it super user-friendly. So we're actually trying this out now in a sandbox to actually improve. We have some legacy Visualforce that we're having some challenges with on mobile. And we've had challenges with for years and years and years. And we kind of just said, okay, this won't be a thing we use on mobile. Well, it's gotten to the point it needs to be a thing on mobile. So do we go and rebuild this whole Visualforce page? We don't want to do that right now because we'll probably do that when we move to Lightning. So how can we get people to enter this data in a way that makes sense, that when they're entering something, it's going to cross multiple objects and we need stuff to be displayed on one page? We could do this by using the flow designer and launching it from an action against a record.
And if you want to learn
love it.
how to use flows and actions, you can go to thewizardnews.com and read a blog post I wrote about the beta feature back in winter.
Shameless plug. Shameless plug. Shameless plug.
Link in the show notes. So that sounds amazing. I want to hear more about that once your users are actively using it, because I never considered actually using the flow in mobile through the actions in that way. And I would love to hear how it responds. How responsive is it in the mobile, in a real world situation?
Well, that's the thing is, if you've got, because the thing is the whole Lightning components and flow thing is really bare bones out of the box, but you can add custom based components all you want. And it sounds like you've got a bunch that you can add. And so that really becomes at that point like a Lightning page builder.
Yes.
Lightning page builder.
And this is how you get around the fact that I think there's two things that need to happen in mobile yesterday. Like if I waved my magic Cheryl wand and I could make the mobile team at Salesforce develop anything.
Listen up, mobile team.
They know this already. They've been hearing a lot from me lately. But one is mobile only layouts, to have a separate layout. And this kind of gets around that a little bit. And then the other one is the ability to log in as your users on mobile, because we can talk a little about this. It is hard, and I don't think I realized how hard it was going to be. Not necessarily doing a lot of the development. Definitely, I think kind of figuring out Lightning components was the way to go. I think once we got past that hump, I think if you have a developer and you can do things and you need to do some really custom stuff, I think Lightning components is the way to go. But being able to support your users on mobile. If your users aren't at a place where you can do like a GoToMeeting, like you can't necessarily share somebody's mobile screen easily that you can see what's going on. And if you can't necessarily replicate it, there's no way to log in as another user through the app. And, maybe it's because they have an outdated version of iOS, maybe because they have an old iPad or an old iPhone.
Just have them give you your phone, Cheryl. I mean, just hand the phone over to the admin and let the admin, have access to it. I mean, what's perfect.
What could possibly go wrong?
From my standpoint, the one thing I really would like to have for mobile is better offline capability, because it's kind of there already with some read functionalities. But the weird thing I have is I tend to go in places where I have connections, but it's really poor connection. And for whatever reason, in that situation, offline doesn't kick in. It doesn't recognize that I'm really offline. And so it just doesn't do anything. I have to actually force my phone into airplane mode to use offline sometime, which kind of defeats the purpose, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So,
What I'm hoping is I haven't actually used Field Service Lightning. However, I read a lot about it because when I was thinking about what our salespeople needed to do, I was thinking, okay, what is already out there that I could maybe model something after, even if, my salespeople aren't taking like work orders and like going to install things, they're going on meetings talking about our products, right? So I looked at Field Service Lightning for like a look and feel, and in the most recent releases, they have a lot of offline capability. And I believe his name is Paulo, who used to be the lead person for mobile, is now over both mobile and Field Service Lightning. So I'm hoping that some of these things get combined together. I don't have any knowledge if they will or they won't, but I really hope that they do, because I think some of that functionality that was released in Field Service Lightning would be really helpful to admins and developers generally, regardless of what type of user you have that's using mobile.
So I know there is I think maybe it's not a beta anymore. There is a better offline that got added, where you actually have the ability to do some editing while offline.
right.
Have you had a chance to test that at all, Cheryl?
Yes, we've done some testing with it. We're actually still doing some testing. We, which I think you started alluding to in the beginning, had some challenges with mobile. So any new development and new things we're testing had to be on hold until we could figure out some of the challenges we were having. But we have started testing that and to see, how we can, so you can actually set which objects you want, to have some offline capabilities and things like that. And I definitely think that there's a lot of stuff that's come pretty recently to mobile that's really, really helpful to admins and developers, especially when you're working with, sales or service or whoever your users are that are on the road a lot.
And I think the mobile-only layouts, they've been talking about that. Like they talked about that at Dreamforce. They've been talking about it at Salesforce World Tour. It's on the roadmap, and I think Safe Harbor, I believe it's planned for by the end of the year. That's the last I heard. Am I remembering that right?
That's an awful forward-looking statement you have there, Mark.
I said Safe Harbor. What more do you want?
The actual mobile page layouts.
Well, okay, fair enough.
I have not heard any dates, but what I would love to see it by the end of the year. I think that would help. Since Salesforce, what is now known as Salesforce, iOS or Salesforce for Android, when it was originally known as Salesforce One, I remember thinking, because I did mobile back in the day in like 2004, 2005 with Salesforce with IntelliSync. So I've been doing mobile for years and years and years, just in different ways, but not this advanced. This is the first time I've had to do true mobile development. I think the first thing I was looking for was a mobile only layout. And I remember thinking like, I don't get it. Am I missing something? And I remember asking this question. I remember asking this question on Twitter and being like, no, we don't have that. And I was like, what? And I was like, how did this get missed? I feel like it's a key feature.
Because the experience on the desktop is supposed to be the same as the experience on the mobile.
Yeah, no.
No.
So you've gone through your fair share of trials and tribulations in all this. You've mentioned that you had some troubles you were working through. And because of that, you've had a fair amount of interaction that you've had to deal with support and some direct interfacing with PMs. Yeah. And a lot of people have trouble with support. I'm sorry, Salesforce. That's a fairly understood thing, I think, by this point. What sort of things would you advise, would you tell people to help them kind of navigate that gauntlet?
So I think the first thing you want to make sure when you have an issue, you first feel like you have an issue that is not something that because you didn't configure something correctly, or when you really feel like something's gone wrong. And
we never do anything wrong, Cheryl. We are perfect. We never forget to add values of a pick list to a record type.
That was awfully specific, Brian.
And even if you do, they'll help you solve it. I mean, I definitely have had both really good and really some really not so good experiences with support. I will say, through this whole trials and tribulations we had with mobile, the support was like fantastic. I mean, I think really lucked out. The support rep we had was just phenomenal. And I think when you have a bug, or you think you found a bug, I think to make sure you're providing the exact steps, even though it may be time consuming, the exact steps, make sure Salesforce, especially with something like mobile, they're going to need actual logins, because there's no way to log in with another user, not even from support.
What do you mean the exact steps? The exact steps of what?
The exact steps to replicate the issue. So exactly what you have to do, the type of user you have to be in, the type of record example, links to records, screenshots, error messages, every piece of detail you can give them. You have to remember, we know our orgs really, really well. Support is managing, I don't even know how many hundreds of thousands or millions of customers Salesforce has now.
And they should all be listening to the WizardCast. But they're
they
not.
Should. They 100% should. So you have to remember, they don't know your org. So if you're like, when user clicks on an action, they get an error. Okay, from what page, which type of user, which action, and what was the error? And I think think about it, take yourself out of your role as an admin, somebody that knows, or a developer that knows your org really well. And think about somebody who is starting like day one, or let's say you're starting day one on your job, and the salesperson comes to you and says, this thing's broken. Well, what thing, right? So kind of think about like how you would kind of, what questions you would ask if you didn't necessarily know your org, and make sure you're providing all of that to support. Also, I make sure you give the correct org IDs, that if you want them to check in a sandbox or production, if you're having the issue. So we were able to replicate our issues across all our sandboxes and production and everything. But if you're able to only maybe replicate it in one sandbox versus another, are they on different versions? Because sometimes that can happen. Like, if you have one on winter, one on spring, things like that. So they have all those details. And I think, sometimes I know a lot of us, if you're having a major issue, take the time to have a call with support and really walk them through what the challenge is, especially if it's something like mobile where you can't necessarily do a ton of screen sharing. Yes, you have like the simulators on Chrome, but
it's not the same.
It's not the same.
And if you don't know how to do simulator on Chrome, it's going to developer tools. And I just learned this recently, so I wanted to showcase my knowledge for people. It's you turn on developer tools, and then there's a little icon. It looks like kind of a phone and an iPad. You click on that, and it will actually let you switch to another format.
And if you actually want to see that happen, you can go to thewizardnews.com, because they'll eventually put something up there too, because, shameless plug to get more traffic.
And
okay,
also
sorry to interrupt.
There's also Salesforce actually puts out a Chrome extension you can use that installs an app. That's actually what I use a lot. And then there's also, if you have one thing that I learned recently is if you have a MacBook and you're using iOS devices, you can actually use QuickTime Player to replicate what's actually going on your iPhone or your iPad on your MacBook, and then use like a GoToMeeting to actually share that. So if you have access to those types of devices, that helps as well. But yeah, so I think making sure you have all the steps there. And I think also making sure that Salesforce knows really, truly what the impact of this issue is. How many, not only just how many users, but what can't people do? And how is it impacting your business? And are there any other things dependent on this? Like, is there another project that's dependent on this? Are people's jobs dependent on this app working? Meaning they can't do their job without it, or whatever feature it is. Are there certain things, like maybe you have a workaround, but that workaround is only available to a certain point in time, make sure they have all that information. It definitely is time consuming to deal with support, but I think in cases like this where you really, do have a bug or something that you're working through, I think it's really imperative to provide that. And I will say that, I've had a couple of, issues over the years, not frequently, but when I've had them, they've been like big ones that, you've had to spend a lot of time with support going through things and testing things. And I think you have to think of it as working as a team. It's not going to help if you get like really annoyed at support or don't want to talk with them and be like, this is your thing, not my thing. Like if you've built something custom on the platform, yes, they support it, but they're not going to know it the way you do. And to talk to them, get scheduled calls with them. If you feel like things aren't moving, ask for updates. If you really feel like you're not getting the response you want, use that escalate button.
There's an escalate button?
There is. Well, I have Premier Support, so maybe there isn't for everybody, but I have an escalate button.
But you can also ask to escalate. If you're having, but you have to provide the reason for that. It can't be something as simple as, oh, I don't like you. You can also ask, and I've done this a couple of times. You can also ask to have a different support rep take over your case without escalating. And they will do that. Mm-hmm. Ask nicely. Yes.
And also there's different tiers of support. So typically you go into like a tier 1 or tier 2, based on, and then once you get into like whether they've determined like, yeah, this is not working as designed or something is not right, you go in like the tier 3 realm, which is essentially the next step up as product. So they're going to be your interface to product. But I think also sometimes what I think helped me through this whole thing beyond talking to support is there's a mobile group on the Trailblazer community that I joined, I'm fairly active in, and I posted, I'm like, hey, is anybody having this issue? And they're like right away, like 5 or 6 other people were like, yes. I'm like, okay, so I'm not crazy, right? So
screenshots, paste to case.
Yeah. And I think, and I was able to send that, and I know some of the product managers, and the product manager's like, oh, do you have a case in? And like, you could actually go see this thread, and I gave the case number, other people gave their case numbers, and all of a sudden it really started to gain movement, because I think sometimes when there's a number of customers saying that there's a problem here, I think they really start focusing on it. But I do have to say, while, it was definitely challenging, all the issues that we came across, and I think, I'm not sure if we could have done anything better, but I think it definitely, I think Salesforce, did try to help us as much as they could. But I will tell you, I've tested a ton of versions of the new mobile app that got released on February 12th, and that has the Cheryl Feldman stamp of approval. So
I want to see the official stamp. So you talked about going all the way up to product, and you talked about working with people like Michael Orr with when you're developing your mobile app. So you've had the privilege, we'll use the word privilege, of working with product managers over at Salesforce. Yes. And I would love you to talk about a little bit about your experience and tips for other people to work with them, especially now. I think people can see, especially in the Trailblazer community, that a lot of the product managers are getting more involved and asking for more feedback from customers and suggestions. And there may be the time where you pick up your phone and it's a product manager on the other line asking you to participate in something. Or you have something that you want to bring up to a product manager. So can you please talk a little bit about your experience? How did you manage to get in touch with a product manager? Because I would think a lot of folks probably have no clue.
I think majority of my interactions with product management happen in 2 places. 1, on Twitter, and 2, in the Trailblazer community. There are product managers, I'm sure they have alerts and different tools to monitor when people talk about different things, their product on Twitter. I know I just mentioned one time I was going to be trying custom metadata types. This was like over a year ago. And the product manager was like, hey, I see you're an admin. What are you doing with custom metadata types? And it started a whole conversation, and we ended up doing a couple presentations together on what I was doing with custom metadata types as an admin. So I think there's a lot of the product managers I found at Salesforce are really, really good. They, a lot of times when you go to them with your issue or things you want, they already are aware of it. It just hasn't been prioritized yet, or something else needs to be done. Or even if they're not aware of it, they want to understand more, and they want to understand what your use case is or what your challenge is. That's why it's their product. That's their thing, I guess, who want to, like, their little baby that they want to make sure is, moving forward and doing what the Salesforce customers needed to do.
And to be fair, my personal experience has been never assume that a PM has thought of an idea that you've had.
Yes.
Because they will, there's been times when I've pointed stuff out to, like, the Flow PM, and he's like, wow, we never even thought of that. And I'm not sure that any of those things that I ever suggested will ever actually make it. But
you haven't bribed
but it was
Scott
just a
enough.
different way of looking, huh?
You haven't bribed Scott enough.
But it was another way of looking at the product that he hadn't considered at the time. And so if nothing else, it helps them to kind of train their brain a little bit more in the admin chair instead of the product owner chair.
Yes. And I think, if you do get a chance to talk to a product manager, and I don't think it matters who you are, whether you're an MVP, whether you're at a big customer, small customer, I think definitely post what you think, X feature should be doing that it doesn't do, or whatever challenge. Majority of the different products have some sort of group or place to give feedback within the Trailblazer community. And I definitely know that a lot of product managers are monitoring that, and they look at it. And sometimes you'll see other product managers bringing in other product managers to look at something you're posting or something you're trying to do. And I think if you are going to talk to a product manager, definitely, know what you want out of that conversation.
Oh, okay. So hold on a second. You said Trailblazer community.
Yes.
What is that?
So that is the rebranded success community.
What's the success community? I'm being a jerk because I happen to know we do get occasional people who are brand new to Salesforce and may not know that if you go to success.salesforce.com.
Yes. So success.salesforce.com, make sure you bookmark that if you're a Salesforce admin, developer, user, anybody involved in the ecosystem in any way. And what this is a community, an online community, where you can connect with other admins, developers, users, whether you're an admin, whether you're a developer, whether you want to join a user group, whether you want to talk about a specific product, whether you're not sure how to do something, because there's a whole answer section on there. And you can really interact not only with Salesforce employees, you can interact with your peers at other companies to get ideas on what other people might be doing. There's also the IdeaExchange, where if you have an idea for a product, you can put it up there or vote on an existing idea. And there's also one of my favorite groups, True to the Core, which really helps. A lot of the product managers are in there. So if you have an idea that you feel like is true to the core of the platform of the product that either has been sitting out there or you're trying to understand when it's coming, you can post in there, and usually product managers get back to you very quickly. I think talking to product managers is, so are you looking for them to add something to their roadmap? Are you looking for them to solve a problem? I wouldn't necessarily have a call the product manager to be like, your feature sucks.
Yeah. Well, because we've all seen those on the IdeaExchange, right? There's somebody who posts the idea, or they post in the comments like, it's been 10 years to get your act together, Salesforce, you suck. It's like you're not helping at all by doing it this way.
Yeah. And, I've actually presented, I remember I went to a product manager a couple of years ago with this idea. And I had a whole presentation on why they needed to do this, how it's going to benefit people. I got lists of other customers that were trying to solve the same problem and, should we custom build it, or were they going to come out with something? And I got on with a couple of other customers that were in the same industry as I'm in, and we presented this idea, and now it's pretty much here. So I think it's definitely great to interact and find out who those product managers are. Also, Dreamforce, Trailhead DX, any world tours, there's always product managers around. If you're not sure who you want to talk to, definitely post in the Trailblazer community. And I think also just, asking on Twitter, somebody's bound to know who the product manager is. And I've always found that product managers are always really interested in talking to customers, because sometimes they don't realize, like, some of the stuff I remember I showed. We built a whole custom, it's a combination between a custom search and a custom reporting tool. And we built using some Visualforce pages, as well as having custom metadata types on the back end. And I don't think Vladimir, in his wildest dreams, thought that somebody would be using custom metadata types to house a custom search, and to house all the features of a custom search, and to control what's actually, showing on a custom search. And it was just like an idea we had, because we could deploy it, right? So, and I think sometimes, like, product managers, like, I never thought that anybody would use this feature like that. And I think, not only reaching out to product managers when you have a problem, but sometimes I will reach out to product managers and be like, guess what I developed on your really awesome feature? Can I show it to you?
Yeah, and they really like that.
Mm-hmm. That's actually how I got to know some of the mobile PMs, because when I started on this journey of building on mobile, I reached out to mobile. I happened to be in San Francisco for a work event. And I reached out and said, hey, I'm going to be in San Francisco. I'm building this mobile app. And two of the mobile PMs were like, yeah, why don't you come by, like, when you're here? And I showed them in its infancy last summer. And they were like, this is so cool. And I was walking them through our use case, what our data model was, and why we were doing that. And they were like, oh, yeah, we have heard this from some other customers in the industry. And, this, you're doing the right thing. And I think it really definitely start to form that relationship of, people that are doing something with their feature, that when they start doing other things with that feature, they'll reach out to you and say, hey, we're thinking about doing this. What do you think about that? Or, we have this pilot or this beta coming out. Would you be interested in trying it?
And I can also say from personal experience, if you give a request to a product manager and they're not necessarily the most receptive, keep pushing it, like, politely. Like, don't be a jerk about it. Don't be, don't email them every week or anything like that. But, when you see them at True to the Core at Dreamforce or at a community event, bring it up again. There's at least one PM I know of. I'm not going to name any names or point out what area they're from, but there's at least one I can think of who is a bit obstinate. And there have been things that, like, I can remember years ago him saying no, and it's not on a roadmap. We're not going to do it. And this year at the recent Dreamforce, he finally was like, yeah, that's happening now. So don't give up if you get disheartened. Ultimately, it will pay off.
Yeah, and I think sometimes when product managers are saying no, it's not because they don't think it's a good idea or it should be part of the product. It's because they've already got this huge roadmap of other things that they need to do first. And think about it in your own job, right? So think about yourself. Like, I really admire, product managers. Like, even though Shauna Wolverton has moved on from Salesforce, she's always been somebody.
Miss you, Shauna.
I know, I miss her so much. I always DM her on Twitter at least once a week, be like, I'm thinking of you. I miss you. Like, you're my idol. I want to be just like you when I grow up. No, it's true. I remember meeting her the first time, like, maybe like Dreamforce 10 or Dreamforce 11, I think was maybe the first time I interacted with her. And I remember thinking, I want to be just like her when I grow up. And I remember she said she was a product manager. I was like, what the hell's that? I mean, I knew what that was. I knew what that term was, but I didn't really understand. And a lot of my role now is product ownership, which is very much like product management. And I think you have to think about it like in your own job. You have X amount of users. If all your users are asking for something, you can't do everything. And sometimes you want to do this other thing, but you need to do all this other stuff first to clean up or get ready for this other feature. So you have to kind of think about it. Think about it in your own world, like, and think about in your own priority. Like, maybe it is something that would be really helpful to admins and developers everywhere, but think about maybe there's something else that's coming, or maybe that there's something else that needs to be done. So I think definitely asking the question, well, why isn't it coming? And I think, or why was this one feature constructed this way? And maybe there was some technical limitation you're not aware of. And I've always found product managers to be very open and candid and transparent about things like that when you do ask those questions.
Especially if you can catch them like alone. Sometimes they can't say things on a stage, but they will still, like, especially if you've developed a rapport, they'll still be like, well, we actually have this one thing where it turns out we had to build this way because this is how Zoho built it, and we're trying to be competitive or something like that, right? Yep. So I mean, that's the thing. Sometimes it's things we never think of. Like there's competitive influences, there's shareholder influences, there's all sorts of things beyond. Like people say, why the hell did you do this feature? Nobody's ever going to use this. And it turns out that there is like some other very important factor that we just don't think of because we're not the product people.
Right.
Right. And I always think there's a method to the madness. I always do believe that. And I do believe that pretty much, I wouldn't say I've ever interacted with a PM at Salesforce that I don't think really knew their product really well and really was willing to answer questions, or even, I mean, there's been times where I've had very heated discussions with product management about some of their features that I just think are awful, and trying to understand why things are that way. And I think they understand that they're not great either, and they're going to see what they can do to improve them. But you can't move mountains overnight, especially on a feature that, has been around for a while or is, so heavily baked into the platform.
Yeah, Salesforce is an aircraft carrier. It does not turn on a dime.
Yeah, I think that would be actually a great idea to have because I think a lot of us, I always think of like product managers at Salesforce. I'm like, this is like the be all and end all of everything amazing. Like to me, it's like you've made it to me, that's like ultimate goal. Like, you've made it when you are a Salesforce product manager. That's like, to me, that's like a long shot dream goal career wise, right? And I think that's something to me, like when I think about like product managers, I'm like, oh my God, they're like the coolest people ever because they get to do all these cool things and talk to all these cool customers and manage all these cool products and, own roadmaps and stuff like that. So
well, that's the thing. You think about how big Salesforce is, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not just a company that happens to be, a product we use. It's actually like a multi-billion-dollar company. And so you have to have some pretty damn good product managers. And I think that's one of the things that, we all act like, we really enjoy working with Salesforce product managers and talking with them. It's because they are good. It's because Salesforce actually hires really good people.
They do.
Or to do that or promote them internally. Yeah. One of the two.
Yeah, I definitely, I 100% agree and stand by that statement that every product manager I've ever interacted with has just been phenomenal. And, while, I think some of the things there can be some definitely, I think, tense discussions sometimes because we're super passionate about Salesforce, but they're also super passionate. We're coming at it from different angles, but I think we can, see each other, through and get through it. But yeah, I mean, I can't say enough good things about the product management team at Salesforce.
All right, so I think we've got one last question before we sign off for the day. If you could ask Parker Harris any question, what would you ask him?
Parker Harris.
Yes, he's the co-founder of Salesforce.
Yes. Okay.
She knows, Brian.
What would I ask Parker Harris?
Because we're hoping to have him on the show at some point. And so we will relay a bunch of people's questions. You should totally
just ask him. You should totally just ask him.
We have.
So if I was going to ask Harris, so I did ask Parker Harris in person my question that I had for him. So I'm going to ask him a different question on your behalf. Would you be on the WizardCast? Because you should. I'd be like, listen, I wouldn't even ask.
I don't think you understand the concept behind this. This is what would you ask Parker? Because you're not going to be able to ask Parker, but when we have Parker, we will ask it. And therefore,
okay, so I think, all joking aside, I think I would ask him what I've always been really curious about is if anybody else had this idea for Salesforce besides Mark Benioff, do you think it would have been as successful? And do you think it's the mix of the two personalities and backgrounds that have made Salesforce so successful? Or does Parker think he could have done this with anybody else? Like if any old person came up to him and said, hey, I have this idea of building this one type of platform, would it have been so successful? It wasn't him and Mark.
That's
an interesting question. Well, it's almost like asking, so do you think you could do this without Mark? I don't know.
I'm honestly, I don't think it's asking that. I think it's asking because I've always been really curious as to how much Salesforce is the product and the engineering versus how much is it Mark Benioff.
The ideas.
And
brainchild.
Yeah. And I've always, wondered that. And I think, my first time I ever met Parker Harris, and you can put this in the podcast or not, it's up to you. First time I ever met Parker Harris is I was invited when the Salesforce admin marketing team first formed back in 2014. They flew a couple of us out to film some videos with them years ago. And while I was there, Salesforce was hosting some sort of women in tech event for the Bay Area. And Parker Harris came, and I saw him just sitting there during network kind of like by himself. And I just walked right up to him, and I had my whole elevator speech because I was like, you know what? I know what's going to happen. I'm going to run into Benioff or Parker Harris, and I'm going to be like, duh. So I made sure I had my elevator speech, and I just was like, hi, my name's Cheryl Feldman. You changed my life. And I told him my whole story in like 60 seconds, and he was like, that's so cool. And, we started talking about my story, and Sarah Franklin was there, Mary Scotland was there. It was really cool.
Nice. And now you're on the login page.
And now I'm on the login page. A lot of people ask me, if I knew that was happening. I had no idea. I found out the same day everybody else. All of a sudden,
it's that little
you want to hear
paperwork?
a really funny story about the login page? The first time I ever saw it, I was in a conference room with 5 sales managers, and I was showing them some changes we were making. So I went to test.salesforce.com to show them our sandbox, and there it is. And one of my sales managers, you know what he says to me? He goes, did you code yourself on the login page to remind us to update your opportunities? And I was like, yes, that is exactly what I did. And then I was like, and at first I was like, did Salesforce figure out my IP address? And is this just a thing? I didn't really understand. And then all of a sudden, getting these tweets, I was like, oh my God, everybody sees this.
See now what we should do, Mark, is we should take that. And we should make that the teaser at the very top of the episode for Cheryl's interview, so people actually stay.
What? I totally didn't follow that.
Like at the very beginning, other podcasts that are good and videos, they'll do an audio teaser or a video teaser of what's actually going to happen later on.
Okay.
Right, because it's a lead-in to get you hooked on the content later on. So that's Cheryl shares the story of how she gets on the login pages, the hook to get you to listen to the rest of the crap we just talk.
That's not our format.
Screw our format. We are adaptive people to things, the stuff to make us better.
You're adaptive. I'm a creature of habit.
I'm writing it into the script.
Dang it, Brian! you're jacking everything up. Okay, sorry you had to hear that, Cheryl.
It's always sad when mom and dad fight.
Who's the mom and who's the dad?
Okay, I gotta ask you another question. Sure.
Okay.
If we were Sesame Street, Bert and Ernie,
God,
which one of us is Bert and which one of us is Ernie?
Neither.
That is a valid answer.
That's the coward route.
I used to hate Bert and Ernie when I was little. I used to hate them.
Well, why? Why?
I don't know. Bert used to make me cry when I was little. I don't know.
Why?
I don't like. I don't know if it was his unibrow or what, but I
This
was
is
like
Argyle.
not having Bert when I was little.
Argyle is traumatizing.
Okay, all right, different one. We've all been to Dreamforce.
Yep.
And we know the time at the keynote when Mark and Parker are on stage together, and they do their little funny banter thing, whether or not Parker's actually dressed up in a costume or not.
Mm-hmm.
So, if we were Mark and Parker, which one of us is Mark and which one of us is Parker?
I think you're both Parker.
I'll take that.
Now you're just asking
I don't know.
weird questions, bro.
I don't know. I think you both probably have a little bit of both, right? So because I think you have to think about like Mark is really like, has the vision and like the, the sales side of things, but Parker has the but Parker has a lot of vision too. So I don't know. It's really hard to tell. I don't know. I think that they're both so valuable and such different
I think he's talking more about like the onstage personalities.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know.
He's not fishing for compliments.
No, you have to understand, Cheryl. Every Dreamforce since Mark and I have gotten together, which sounds really bad. Every Dreamforce since Mark and I have been collaborating with each other. That's better. We sit next to each other, or we're close, or we're sending each other messages on mobile. And every time Parker hits the stage with Mark, we ask ourselves the exact same question. And we argue with each other which one of us is Mark Benioff and which one's Parker Harris.
So which was your conclusion?
Well, it depends, because if we take it from the comedy standpoint of the straight man versus the comedic one.
Parker's the straight man, usually.
Parker's definitely the straight man, which would mean Mark is Parker in that circumstance, and I'm Mark, because I'm by far the person that does not do straight very well because I can't keep my mouth in without laughing. Mark can do that quite well.
Sometimes.
And I'm very good at acting like I'm an idiot.
Okay.
Hopefully it's an act. So, that's kind of the theme. And every year I put it out on Twitter, and every year we get a different answer.
Yeah.
That's where it's coming from.
There you go.
I think you're just better as Brian and Mark. Sorry.
We are our own thing, Brian. We should not be comparing ourselves to those who have gone before. We should be our own.
So you're saying Mark and Parker in the past, and Brian and Mark are the future?
The future. Yes. We are the future.
Parker's
we are the
never
world.
coming on the podcast now.
We are the children. I don't know.
So
we are the children.
I almost feel like unworthy to be on your podcast. You know why?
What?
Can I tell you why? You're gonna laugh.
Okay.
Really. Because I still haven't seen Star Wars.
Which one?
Any of them.
None of them?
Never seen Star Wars.
Okay,
Not
so
even
here's
the original trilogy?
What?
Not even the original trilogy
I've
from
never
like the
seen
70s?
any Star Wars. Never
Okay.
any of them.
Okay, so here's the problem. Because you have never seen any, and what you have seen has been the society's reaction to the mythos, right?
Yeah.
Nothing you ever see will ever live up to what you perceive other people think of it, right? So you have to go into it expecting it to be ridiculous and campy crap.
Because it is.
And it kind of is. But then you will be pleasantly surprised that it's fun, ridiculous, and campy crap. Like it's got this built up kind of armor around it because everybody, builds it up on this pedestal and treats it like it's the greatest thing, right? And if you go in with that kind of expectation, you're gonna be like, "What the hell is this?" No. Do you watch other sci-fi?
Science fiction.
Yeah.
No, this was my rebellion because my parents are Trekkies, and I was like, I don't want any part of this.
Well,
Okay.
no.
So here's the thing.
The ultimate rebellion is being a Star Wars fan instead of a Star Trek fan.
Yes.
Like that's a really good way of actually getting back at somebody. Because it's kind of like saying if somebody asks you, "Hey, have you worked with Salesforce?" and your response would be like, "No, but I work with Dynamics." Like that's going to be an instant kind of reaction that you're going to get. Same thing
Or
with
like, no, that's not the reaction. The reaction is like, oh, I'm sorry.
But it's that equivalency, right?
Yeah.
That somebody would actually treat those two things as like the same thing. Like we would be like, hell no. And so you get the same kind of thing with Star Wars and Star Trek fans. I happen to be both. I happen to actually prefer
They're
Trek a little.
It's completely different. Trek has a better
Okay, now we're digressing.
story. Trek is just a better story.
Yeah, but
it's the difference of an action movie versus a drama.
What about like superhero movies? Those are kind of sci-fi. Do you watch any of those?
Some of them. I haven't seen any like the latest ones. I don't know. I don't like really
Me
go
neither.
to the movies. I don't really go to the movies that much. So I'm kind of lame.
So here's the thing though.
What
does never watching Star Wars or any of those things have to do with not being worthy to be on our podcast?
Because I was like, oh my God, these people are like super cool because they see like Star Wars and like Mark's all about it. And I was like, I'm an
We're
idiot.
cool.
We're super cool, Mark.
I'm cool.
If only my high school self could see me now.
I know, right?
A girl thinks I'm cool.
Because you watch Star Wars. That's a difficult, like, I don't know if any of this is going to make it into the podcast at all, but it's a interesting thing because, you know, we've been into these things for a very long time. And I don't know if I can properly explain this, but back when we were in school, when I was in middle school, high school, being into those things, like if people found out, you were swirly material at that point. Like it was you were a target. You had a bullseye on you at that point. And now there's such cultural norms.
Yep.
It doesn't matter. I was swirly material before people found that.
Well, okay, but the bullseye is redder. It's brighter at that point. Like every little thing that accentuated how different you were was reason. And now it's not a difference anymore. People are much more willing to be like, yeah, I watched that. And because a lot of people do. Superheroes are cool now. Star Wars is cool now.
So,
even things like Dungeons and Dragons are becoming cool now. Like there's some very popular web series out there that are becoming more cool.
popular culture taking away my nerdom.
Vin Diesel,
Cheryl,
a huge D&D player.
Any other things you want to say before we end the episode?
Thank you for having me. It was really fun.
Thank you.
And are you guys going to try DX? Because I'll be there because I just got approval today.
Just got approval.
WizardCast is produced by Brian Kwong and Mark Ross, directed by Brian Kwong and Mark Ross, technical administration by Brian Kwong and Mark Ross, script writing by Brian Kwong and Mark Ross, audio editing by Mark Ross, website maintenance by Brian Kwong and Mark Ross, and our intern this episode was Jean Hathorn.
Jean Hathorn. Wait, I've seen the list. She's not on the list of people that you keep claiming give feedback about the WizardCast of Dreamforce. Who is that?
That's right. Jean is one of our followers on our new Twitter account, WizardCast_pod.
Send us your interview suggestions, jokes, videos, tips, and feedback to the WizardCast at thewizardnews.com or head over to thewizardnews.com and click Contact WizardCast.
And we want to hear from you. If you could ask Parker Harris one question, what would it be?
Submit your question by going to bit.ly/ParkerQuestions, all lowercase, and fill out our short form.
And it's almost time for our next Idea Exchange highlight. This is where we expound upon ideas that may be languishing out on the Idea Exchange or something you want a product manager to narrow, because we know there's at least one that listens to this show.
Similarly, go to bit.ly/idea highlight, all lowercase, to submit your idea to us.
Don't forget to subscribe to the WizardCast and receive our next episode automatically.
Please post reviews on Apple Podcasts, the app formerly known as iTunes, and share this episode. It helps others to have to hear what you just had to put up with.
Once again, I'm Brian.
And I want to be like Shauna when I grow up.
Don't we all?
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for listening.
I'm cool now because I was on the WizardCast podcast. I'm officially cool because I was way uncool before.
Oh,
That's
My-
you've
totally,
always been super cool in my book.
that's totally a lie. You were always cool.
No, not at all. I was a total dweeb up until 40 minutes ago, 50 minutes ago.
But you were login page dweeb though.
Total login page dweeb.
There's your title, login page dweeb.